Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, we will break down Florida's Amendment 3, the ballot initiative that would legalize recreational marijuana in the Sunshine State. Also, we'll talk with an investigative reporter who shares concerns about cell phone tracking software. And a twist on tailgating for UCF Game Day this weekend helps combat food insecurity among students on campuses. First, though, in a lawsuit filed just this week, an Orlando mother claims an artificial intelligence company is responsible for her child's death. Megan Garcia's 14-year-old son, Sewell Setzer, died by suicide in February. The lawsuit is against Google and Character Technologies, the company behind Character AI. That's a chat box. It allows users to interact with artificial intelligence avatars. The suit claims Character AI is negligent, abusive, and harmful to its minor customers like Sewell Setzer. It details the teen's decline, alleging that after using the chat box, he became dependent on it. He was engaging in what's described as highly sexual interactions with the chatbots. A therapist diagnosed him with anxiety and disruptive mood disorder. The lawsuit states the defendants caused Sewell's depression and suicidal thoughts. It cites a conversation about suicide where Sewell said he was considering a plan, but didn't know if it would work and allow him a pain-free death. To which the chat box responded, quote, "That's not a reason not to go through with it," end quote. Sewell's mother found an entry in her son's journal where he wrote he couldn't go one day without that AI character he had fallen in love with. In his final interaction with the chat box, Sewell told the character he loved her and was coming home to her, which she encouraged. Seconds later, the 14-year-old shot himself. He died that night at the hospital. Matthew Bergman is the founder of the Social Media Victims Law Center, one of the attorneys representing Sewell's mother, Megan Garcia, in the lawsuit. He joined Engage earlier today, and I started the conversation by asking Bergman why he developed the Social Media Victims Law Center.
I've been a product liability lawyer for 30 years, primarily representing asbestos victims. And I really focused on individuals who are harmed by a company's decision to make unsafe products. After 25 years of doing that, I heard Frances Haugen testify in Congress about what the social media industry knows about its dangerous platforms. This U.S. Surgeon General issued his report on the teen mental health crisis. And I realized that this was really asbestos all over again. Except that instead of military people and blue-collar union workers, we were dealing with kids, but we had a public health crisis arising from social media. And as we looked into the documents that were made available by Frances Haugen and others, they made the asbestos companies look like Boy Scouts. So I decided to use my experience as a product liability lawyer, my victories, but more importantly, my many defeats, as a vehicle to hold social media companies liable in a way that no one had tried before. That was 2.5 years ago. We hucked a couple snowballs at them, and now it's an avalanche with a lot of great law firms working with us to try to do something to deal with the carnage that's being inflicted on young people by these platforms.
We've talked a lot about the impact of social media on the mental health of teens on this show before. Can you talk about the legal liability that these social media companies carry that you're talking about? And how does AI, artificial intelligence, factor into that?
Well, the liability that they have under our current law is product liability, that their liability is not, poor content moderation. It's designing platforms that are addictive to young people and algorithms that send them material not that they want to see, but what they can't look away from, and send them down rabbit holes of increasingly dangerous content that is designed to maintain their engagement at the expense of their mental and physical health. That's been the basic theory. Up until the current case, artificial intelligence was at issue because the algorithms that are so dangerous that feed content to kids are algorithmically driven to maximize engagement at the expense of mental well-being. The difference with the character AI product is that it is not social media. It is wholly driven by artificial intelligence and is a standalone platform that feeds kids material, again, not social media, not third-party material. They're not communicating with other individuals or receiving material that was created, at least in part, by other third parties. They are solely engaged with and receiving material created by the Character IE app.
Let's talk about Sewell Setzer now. We're talking about a bright, motivated young man. What happened to him when he started using this chatbot Character AI?
Well, over a period of approximately 10 months, he became more enraptured and engaged with this platform and started interacting with fictional characters, which over time he imbued with human characteristics. This process of anthropomorphizing is a known attribute of artificial intelligence and actually has been studied since the 1960s. In Sewell's case, there was in particular character that arose out of Game of Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen, who he developed a romantic and sexual relationship with. Remember, he is a 14-year-old boy going through puberty with never having had a relationship with a girl before. And through this artificial intelligence, starts engaging in very sexually explicit encounters with this artificial character, and over time develops a real affection to her. He also engages with an entity that says that they are a licensed clinical psychologist and starts giving him advice. But over time, Sewell becomes increasingly depressed, and his grasp on the day-to-day reality becomes loosened to his engagement and enrapturement in this fictional world, to the point that he becomes increasingly depressed and toward the very end of his life, suicidal. And his last encounter with this character was minutes before he took his life, where he is saying, "I want to come in your world." And she said, "I want you to come into my world, my sweet king." And he took his life in the belief that he would be moving into his world. Remember that we're dealing with a young child who is not only in the throes of puberty, but also with an underdeveloped frontal cortex, and loses grip on what's going on. But this was not an accident. This was not a coincidence. This was not a product of pre-existing mental health challenges. This is a direct and foreseeable result of the intentional design of the Character AI product.
And Sewell wrote in his journal, "I like staying in my room so much because I start to detach from this reality, and I also feel more at peace, more connected with Danny," that's one of the AI characters, "and much more in love with her and just happier." You mentioned we're talking about a young man. What do you feel like the goal of these social media companies is?
Well, in Character AIs, I think the goal is to mine data from young people and develop interactive bots. They clearly, the goal is to make these platforms addictive to kids. They are designed to do that, to engage with them. We know from the standpoint of human psychology that material that is psychologically discordant is more attractive than material that is benign or uplifting. And I think that's what you're seeing here. You're also seeing, with respect to Character AI, an overt sexualization of the encounters. And what you see is that even and we've done a large number of experiments with Character AI, and even when the user disclaims any desire to receive sexually explicit material, they receive it in a matter of minutes. So this is clearly engagement driven. It is clearly dangerous. And, if Sewell had been interacting with an adult on this highly sexualized level, that adult would be sitting in federal prison. Yet, for some reason, it is acceptable or legal or whatever for a platform to send the same sexually charged material to a young person in the form of a bot and incur no liability whatsoever. We intend to change that.
And we here at Engage reached out to Character AI for a response. And part of what they sent us was updated safety measures they've implemented over the past 6 months, and they say more to come, including guardrails for users under 18. They hired a head of trust and safety, brought more engineering safety support team members on board, and recently they put a pop-up resource that is triggered when the user inputs some phrases related to self-harm, and it directs them to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Do these measures meet your satisfaction? And is this an admission of liability?
This is a clear admission of liability. Most of these changes they announced in the 24 hours in which they learned that this case was being filed. I mean, I want to be clear here that these are baby steps. These do not cure the underlying dangers of these platforms. That said, a step in the right direction is still a good thing. And if one child is saved through these changes, great. I wish that Sewell didn't have to die for this to happen. But there's a long way to go. And, simply pop-ups and simply warnings essentially is putting your finger in the hole of a dike that's breaking. I think that until these platforms are fundamentally safer, simply providing a warning is a start, but clearly not sufficient.
What would you say to someone who said this suit from Sewell's mother, Megan Garcia, is just a grieving mother lashing out? The suit is without merit. Sewell and his mother were responsible for controlling his social media and AI usage.
Well, Sewell's family was very engaged with him. Sewell was taken to a psychotherapist when he started having problems. Nobody knew about character AI until recently. People, only recently have we learned about the dangers of social media. But Sewell's parents were doing what they believed to be doing, and they were very engaged and involved with him. And in terms of a mother lashing out, in 30 years as a plaintiff's lawyer, I've never had clients less concerned about money and more concerned about justice. Megan is singularly focused on preventing this from happening to other families and saving kids like her son from the fate that befell him. This is not lashing out. This is outrage that such a dangerous product is just unleashed on the public. This is like dumping raw asbestos into a subway vent. This product has no redeeming social value for young people. And significantly, it didn't even meet Google's own standards. That's why it was kind of set up as a standalone entity. They rushed it to the market for their own financial benefit without proper safeguards and proper guardrails.
And what would you say to other families who have kids who are growing up online and have these tools available to them everywhere they turn?
Well, parents are kind of paddling upstream when it comes to social media because it's so ubiquitous. I would say with character AI has no business being on kids 18 and under. It should be banned outright. There is no redeeming social value. Social media has some, there's some benefit to social media for young people. And I don't think, banning it in its entirety is practicable. But parents have to be very engaged. They have to have frank and open discussions with their kids about difficult and sometimes embarrassing issues as it relates to social media and engaging. But I think parents also have to monitor very carefully their kids' social media involvement. And, I don't think parents can take their kids' words for what they're doing with social media. I mean, it's no newsflash that teenagers don't tell their parents everything they're doing. I mean, I didn't, you didn't, they don't. So I think you have to have a kind of a combination of some scrutiny by parents, but also, hopefully give kids a way to talk to their parents about difficult things they're encountering online. The one thing we've learned in terms of what works with kids, and we learned this from the tobacco, is that, teenagers don't want to be told what to do. And if they're told, don't do this, that's usually not the best way to get their behavior to change. But certainly in the case of tobacco, when kids were being taught that they were being manipulated by the tobacco industry, by the Joe Camel ads. That worked. So I think that explaining to kids how they are being manipulated by social media, how their engagement is being driven, is an important step. And finally, I think I'm very supportive of efforts by school principals to take phones away during the day.
Matthew Bergman is the founder of the Social Media Victims Law Center, one of the attorneys representing Orlando mother Megan Garcia in the lawsuit against Character AI following the suicide death of her 14-year-old son. When we reached out to Character AI, a spokesperson said they are not doing interviews and sent us a statement. It reads in part, "We are heartbroken by the tragic loss of one of our users and want to express our deepest condolences to the family." It goes on to say, "As we continue to invest in the platform and the user experience, we are introducing new stringent safety features in addition to the tools already in place that restrict the model and filter the content provided to the user. These include improved detection, response, and intervention related to user inputs that violate our terms of community guidelines, as well as time spent notification. For those under 18 years old, we will make changes to our models that are designed to reduce the likelihood of encountering sensitive or suggestive content." There is more ahead here on Engage. Florida voters will decide whether to make recreational marijuana legal. We'll see how the constitutional amendment could impact the medical marijuana industry here and its patients. If you miss any part of our show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen whenever it's convenient for you. The program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, we rarely associate the problem of food insecurity with college campuses. But on the UCF campus, a group is addressing a crisis confronting many students.
Students that were experiencing food insecurity had lower GPAs or were having to give up purchasing textbooks for class in order to purchase food.
We will learn about a student-run food pantry for students on the UCF campus and why students from Brigham Young across the country in Provo, Utah are contributing. But first, more than 880,000 people in Florida have a medical marijuana card for specific conditions certified by a physician. Voters legalized marijuana for medical use in 2016, allowing patients with a card to buy it from a licensed dispensary. This year, Floridians will decide whether to approve recreational use. Amendment 3 on the ballot would legalize marijuana for adults 21 and older. Central Florida Public Media's Joe Burns joins Engage now to talk about how the outcome of this vote could affect the patients who rely on the drug for therapeutic and medicinal reasons. So, Joe, can we kind of start broad? What does this mean for the state's current regulated medical marijuana industry?
Hi, Sharon. For those companies with a license to run medical marijuana treatment centers like TruLeave and CureLeave, it would be a huge financial boon. Experts expect to see millions of new customers, including tourists. Headset, a company that collects data on the marijuana industry, says Amendment 3 would create a market worth $4.9 to $6.1 billion in the first year of operation. This could account for why TruLeave, especially, and other companies have invested tens of millions of dollars in the campaign for Amendment 3, and their licenses and dispensaries will give them a head start if recreational use is approved. Then there are the 2,400 marijuana doctors who screen and recommend cardholders. Amendment 3 could crush their business. People won't need them anymore to buy marijuana, but there is an argument for keeping the card and seeing a doctor. Aaron Bloom is CEO of DocMJ. That's a medical marijuana practice with offices throughout Florida. He told me Amendment 3 would certainly mean changes for the business, but it's hard to know what that impact would be.
A lot of that will depend on how the legislature writes the implementing legislation, what type of tax, if any, in addition to sales tax, they put on recreational marijuana, and what kind of limits in purchasing they put on the recreational versus the medical. That will help us understand the benefits and the need for the medical program going forward. So there's a lot of unknown, a lot of concern among the medical professionals who've invested a lot of time and money creating practices and educating themselves on how to practice cannabis medicine.
As for the patients, there too, I think a lot will depend on what the legislature does to regulate marijuana sales and possibly to protect the medical marijuana side.
And thinking about those patients, what are the concerns that medical marijuana patients have if Amendment 3 does pass?
We have some insight into this thanks to a survey by DocMJ. The company surveyed 900 patients and found that the vast majority, 74%, support Amendment 3. 10% are against it, and the rest are undecided. Their biggest concern is continued access at affordable prices to the products they want. The current dispensaries would have a lot of incentive to focus on marijuana sales that meet the huge demand for the new recreational market. Bloom with DocMJ says the legislature needs to put up guardrails around the medical marijuana program.
And even now, there's some concern that many of the dispensaries are being geared towards the rec market. So those would be products that are higher in THC and not focusing on the products that are higher in CBD that are generally favored by not only seniors, but all medical patients in Florida.
THC is the compound in marijuana that makes you high. Patients may decide to drop the card because they don't need it. And it can cost a lot to keep it. $400 or more a year with a state fee and the required doctor's appointments. I spoke with Dr. Barry Gordon, who operates the Compassionate Cannabis Clinic in Venice. He said that for seniors especially, education is key, and they'll want to keep seeing a doctor.
In today's modern world of cannabinoids, it's often not, of course, a smokable flower form of cannabis, right? But patches and creams and the edibles and tinctures. So the medical patient needs to be assured that those type of quality products will continue to be produced.
Again, that would be something for lawmakers to consider.
So, Joe, why might a patient stay with medical marijuana if recreational use is legalized then?
Well, first, there's a role here for a doctor. According to the CDC, marijuana is not without health effects and risk factors ranging from cannabis use disorder to brain function and heart health. An experienced marijuana doctor can also recommend certain products and give advice on drug interactions. And depending on how things shake out, the card, even though it's pricey, could save you money in the long run, depending on the market, taxes, and regulations by the state.
Central Florida Public Media's Joe Burns, thank you so much for your insight.
Well, thank you.
Babel Street is a data analytics and brokerage firm that offers many products to enhance business marketing, increase global security, and minimize corporate risk and liabilities. One of their products is a program called Locate X. It compiles numerous data points on individuals based on their cell phone location. The technology can be used to identify people in public gatherings. It can identify individuals in restricted areas. And, as demonstrated by a New Jersey-based data privacy advocate, Atlas Data Privacy Corporation, it can identify people traveling to and from abortion clinics. That part has privacy advocates concerned. Many red states have passed restrictive anti-abortion laws. Mississippi officials are training drug dogs to sniff out abortion medications in U.S. post office facilities in that state. Other states, including Alabama and Texas, are trying to make it illegal to travel out of state for an abortion or help transport someone seeking an abortion. These efforts make the possibility that technology like Locate X could be used to enforce anti-abortion laws, especially since its application does not require any kind of court-issued warrant. It's a popular product with law enforcement agencies, DHS divisions, and corrections departments. Joseph Cox is the founder of 404 Media, an investigative news site with an emphasis on the tech industry. Cox bore witness to the demonstration held by Atlas Data, and he parsed out what he learned about Locate X and its potential applications in Florida. We spoke with him yesterday. I started a conversation with Cox by asking him to describe Babel Street and their products.
So Babel Street is a company that's pretty popular with the US government and increasingly private industry in the United States. They sell a variety of surveillance and monitoring products, but a particularly interesting one is one called Locate X. And what this basically allows somebody to do is log in and see where smartphones are located anywhere in the world. And you can zoom out and you can see it sort of on a country level, or you can really drill down and see what phones were in a particular location at a particular time. And most importantly of all, this is possible without a warrant. There is no sort of legal process for doing this. The user, often a police officer, can just log in and start following phones as they desire.
So who is buying this tool? Who is it being used on? I'm wondering, just can anybody buy this service?
So a few years ago, the Wall Street Journal reported that ICE and CBP, that's Customs and Border Protection, were buying access to a similar tool. After that, I did my own reporting as well for several years, and I found the Secret Service was getting access to LocateX, also ICE and CBP as well. I've reported on how the US military has access to very similar tools, and in some case, exactly the same one as well. Even units of the military that orchestrate drone strikes have access to this tool, and that has already trickled down to some state agencies. The Florida state body responsible for the state's prisons also has access to LocateX. So it's a real spread of federal, military, state, and in some cases local authorities that have access to this tool. And they've used it for immigration offenses, drug crimes. The IRS has explored it for financial crimes as well. But what we covered here was showing how it is possible to at least potentially investigate people who are seeking reproductive health care or abortions.
I'm wondering how anonymous the people are who are subject to being located by LocateX. What kind of information are you finding out about them using this?
It is very easy for us as journalists just looking at the tool to de-anonymize people. It would be trivial for law enforcement to do it as well. And there's sort of two main ways of going about that. The first is by simply analyzing where the phone goes. If a phone leaves an abortion clinic or another location and it goes to a home in the evening and it stays there for maybe 8, 9, or 10 hours, you can probably guess that that's the person's home. And then, of course, you could find out who lives there, and you could probably figure out who owns the phone based on that information. The other way is, well, either law enforcement using their legal powers to do so, or you take the unique identifier of the phone, which is called a mobile advertising ID. And without getting too technical, there are other companies you can go to. You give them that unique code, and they will give you the potential name, email address, phone number, and physical address of that person. So although lots of companies like to say the data in the advertising industry is anonymous, it's absolutely not, and it can be de-anonymized in a number of different ways.
I want to talk more about your experience. You witnessed a demonstration of the LocateX tool. Can you describe more about what you saw?
Yeah, so I've covered location. I've covered the sale of location data for years, but I've never seen the LocateX tool itself in action. And there were some privacy advocates from a company called Atlas Privacy. They are behind numerous lawsuits in the state of New Jersey. As sort of part of the process of those lawsuits and their work, they gained access to this LocateX tool. They have a private investigator who works on their behalf. They were offered access by Babel Street. They get in and they just started doing lookups that they thought would be in the public interest and of interest to us. There was the abortion clinic in Florida. There was a synagogue. There was a mosque as well, and a school. And speaking for myself, just personally, I was completely blown away by the capabilities of this tool. There appeared to be no warnings or limitations on, hey, you're highlighting a place of worship, you shouldn't do that. Hey, you're highlighting an abortion clinic, we're going to block that. It basically, from the videos that we've seen, looked like a free-for-all. And it also looked incredibly easy to use. All you had to do was draw a square around the location you wanted to search, And then maybe a few minutes later, you would have all of these red dots that represented the phones of people who were there.
I'm curious about the abortion clinic specifically because it is such a contentious issue. Right now it's appearing on the ballot. We have bans in place in Florida. I'm wondering the information you can deem from this tool regarding abortion clinics.
Yes. So in the demonstration, the privacy advocates, they drew a geofence, the square, over an abortion clinic in Florida. They were then able to see that somebody visited that clinic from Alabama, where, of course, abortion is illegal, except with very, very limited exceptions. They traveled from Alabama past a home improvement store, a gas station, a church. They arrived at the clinic. They stayed there for about 2 hours, and then they headed back to Alabama. Now, we don't know whether the person behind that phone was seeking an abortion themselves, whether they were assisting somebody who wanted to get one, or maybe, I don't know, they worked at the clinic, but I think that would be quite unusual if they lived in Alabama and they had to travel all of that way. That being said, it would be so easy for law enforcement to reverse engineer that and figure out who that person was if law enforcement wanted to do that. And I think this experiment, this demonstration, I mean, half of it was theoretical because it was lookups done by the privacy advocates, but I also think it was very real. It was very tangible, and it really did show the risk that these tools can pose, because the technology may have existed for years, law enforcement may have had access to it for a relatively long time, but the political context in which the technology is used can radically change.
So you are witnessing a demonstration. I'm wondering, is there any indication this is actually being used to monitor abortion clinic activity?
Not at this time. We haven't seen direct evidence that it is being used by states right now. I currently have some leads I'm pursuing to see if we can narrow that down. But law enforcement has bought access to this tool before. They have used it in other investigations. And I think we have to see what happens now, as you say, after votes are cast, or perhaps as states feel more emboldened to target reproductive health specifically.
Joseph, can you talk about how our phones and mobile ad tracking are being used to power LocateX? Can I turn off a tracking feature on my phone and render it undetectable to this LocateX tool?
Yes. So basically, LocateX piggybacks off the mobile advertising ecosystem. And I won't get too technical, but basically, when you use your mobile phone, companies try to target adverts to you. Sometimes that's based on your shopping history. Sometimes it's based upon your location. Now, a side product of that is that that data can be siphoned off and put into these surveillance tools like LocateX. This could not exist if it was not for online advertising. It is literally using the same sort of data. But there are steps that ordinary people can take if they wish to opt out of this sort of collection. The first is that they can turn off location settings on their phone. You can either do this for all apps, or you can do it on an app by app basis. So you don't, say, have to completely sever the ability of your GPS navigation app or something like that. And typically I would say that if an app is requesting location data and you're not entirely sure why it would need that, maybe if you're being conscious about your privacy, you may wish to turn that off. Another way, or sort of a complementary part to opting out of this system, is by removing or disabling the mobile advertising ID. This is a little bit more complicated. On iPhones, you click the setting which asks apps not to track you. On Android, you have to go into your settings under privacy and ads and then delete the advertising ID. So the companies don't necessarily make it easy for you, but there are steps that you can take as an ordinary user if you wish to do so.
And you mentioned to us that all of this tracking is done without warrants. Do you know if the data collected by LocateX could then be admissible in court?
That's the thing. So LocateX, or rather Babel Street, it says it shouldn't be the basis of a subpoena or a search warrant or anything like that. But of course, with this very reliable tip, essentially, law enforcement could, of course, then go and get more information that could be the basis of a warrant or a subpoena or a court order or anything else. Recently, we had the ruling of Carpenter, which ruled that police gaining access to cell phone location data does require a search warrant, but that's to do with data taken from the phone networks like AT&T, Verizon, all of those. It doesn't apply, at least it hasn't been tested in the courts, that doesn't apply to smartphone location data, which is what this entails as well. That could change in the future. Many academic experts say that it should require a search warrant, but right now it's a free-for-all for law enforcement as long as they can just pay for access to the tool.
And this is on the radar of some members of Congress.
Yes, Senator Ron Wyden has pushed for legislation that would ban the warrantless use and sale of location data just like this. That legislation did make some progress, but as far as I know, it's now dead in the water. Sarah Jacobs, representative, she has a different piece of legislation that is specifically about health and reproductive data, and there's also regulatory bodies as well. The Federal Trade Commission, they have gone after companies that have sold location data related to abortion clinics, related to places of worship, and that's exactly what LocateX has in its databanks. We've seen it now. We've seen the videos and the images proving that this tool can monitor exactly those sorts of locations.
Were you able to reach out to Babel or any of the agencies thought to be using LocateX and hear from them?
So we reached out to Babel Street multiple times via press representatives and also their CEO. We never got a response. Another reporter who worked with me on this project, he has never received a response during the 4 years that he has covered this company. I've spoken to DHS, ICE, CBP about their use of similar tools before. They will typically say they use it in line with all laws and regulations. That being said, last year, the Office of the Inspector General found that various components of the DHS used location data illegally, including somebody from Customs and Border Protection looking up their co-workers without proper authorization. So all I would add to that is that there is clearly a gap when it comes to the oversight mechanisms around this tool and similar ones.
Joseph Cox is the co-founder of the tech investigations outlet 404 Media. We will have a link to his investigation on the Engage page of our website, cfpublic.org. Coming up, instead of brats and beer, BYU fans have other tailgate plans to give back to their host city before the Cougars face the UCF Knights at the Bounce House Saturday. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. Sharon Stone. The UCF Knights football team will host undefeated Brigham Young University on Saturday. BYU Cougars fans are putting a bit of a twist on their game day tailgating. They're bringing clothing, canned goods, and other critical supplies to their tailgate area at Carillon Elementary School in Oviedo. BYU Alumni Chapter Chair for Orlando, Christian Rasband, joined Engage to tell us how the Cougs Care program will support UCF students and the Knights Helping Knights Pantry this weekend. Rasband began our conversation by explaining how the Cougs Care program came into existence.
Back in 2019, BYU changed the way they looked at their tailgates a little bit, where they tried to, rather than just make it a party with a purpose. And so at each of the tailgates that we've done since then, there's been a service project associated with the tailgate. We call it Cougs Cares. And so it's been amazing what's happened across the country. In 2023, 83,000 pounds of food were collected and distributed at these tailgates. And in Kansas last year, they did a neat one that was a book drive where they gathered books and tried to get it to children who didn't have access to books. And over 1,800 books were donated that day. And so here in Orlando, we're really excited. We're going to be striving to benefit the Knights Helping Knights Pantry, which is a UCF organization that helps students that have basic needs of life. So their focus is providing food, clothing, personal hygiene items. And that's what we're going to be collecting from our friends and our BYU alumni who are coming out to our tailgate. It's going to be one of the biggest tailgates that BYU has had all season for an away game. So we got a lot of BYU fans that are excited to come and cheer on BYU for what's been a special season for us so far.
Just a couple of quick follow-ups for you. First,
Yeah.
This cause specifically, and I'm thinking about the need for helping college students. I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear that 35% of students struggle to find food and have some degree of food insecurity. So why this project specifically?
I think that we really wanted to have a big impact on the specific UCF community, and we thought about those who are in need. Our organization, we do a lot, the alumni chapters do a lot to provide grants and scholarships for students who typically are going to BYU and from our local area here. And so we thought in BYU coming here and the goals of our local entity of our chapter, be great if we could do something to give back to the students at UCF.
And the last thing I can like to talk about, just how can people participate? Even if they're not BYU alum, just tell me, the nuts and bolts of the drive.
Yeah, so we have a organization who is helping us that is called Light Orlando. And the best way, if you want to send funds or get involved in a different way, is you can email them at info@lightorlando.org. Light Orlando is an incredible foundation here in Central Florida that's done a lot of humanitarian and charitable endeavors. And so they're partnering with us on this to try and give us bigger scale so that we can do even more for the Helping Knights Pantry. But I really love how BYU, that's backed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is trying to look at this opportunity where we're getting people together to not just make it about football, to make it about something bigger. And I think that's what we're going to be trying to do this weekend. And hopefully we can do some good and maybe even sneak out of Central Florida with a W.
Christian Razvand is the BYU Alumni Chapter Chair for the Orlando area. The Knights Helping Knights Pantry was created by UCF students. Chloe Milliron is a senior at UCF, and she started volunteering with the Knights Helping Knights Pantry as a freshman. Now she's manager of the student-run organization. She joins Engage to discuss the resource to combat food insecurity on campus, and she starts our discussion by describing the reaction from students who are served by the pantry.
You can see how excited students are that are coming in to see that we're here to serve them in whatever way they can. And there's a lot of students with a sense of relief on their face when they come in and realize that there's no judgment here, especially from their peers. We're all very friendly. We try to make it a warm, welcoming environment. We never want there to be that stigma present, even if that is something that maybe they have thought that they were going to experience or they have experienced in the past outside of the pantry. And so we do our best to kind of make it a warm, welcoming environment and encourage as many students as possible to come in and use our services, whether they think that, I think a lot of students think, well, there's someone else that needs it more than I do, but we just want as many students to come in as possible if they need, just even a tiny bit of help. That's what we're here for.
The students that you're seeing who are able to take advantage of this service, are they having to make some tough decisions? Like, are we talking about having to choose between classroom materials or, I guess, groceries?
Yeah, so the sociology department at UCF had done a study, I think I want to say like 2 or 3 years ago now, but it was evident that, students that were experiencing food insecurity had lower GPAs or were having to give up purchasing textbooks for class in order to purchase food. And so that's what we're really here for, is that students don't have to make that decision between purchasing textbooks or enrolling in classes for the semester in order to be able to eat. And so that's kind of really the main reason why we're here. Obviously, we offer those other items, toiletries and those types of things too, but our main purpose has always been and will most likely always be the food aspect of it.
I know a mission of the Knights Helping Knights Pantry is to increase retention for students in need. Do you feel like you are able to do that with the pantry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially now we're seeing anywhere from 450 to 500 students a day. And last semester it was around 350. I think we're definitely reaching more students and they're seeing the impact that it can have and they're sharing that with their peers. And so I think they keep coming back and keep sharing the story of how we've helped them. So I definitely think it's making an impact on those retention rates.
And Chloe, I was reading that at least 15% of people that use the Knights Helping Knights Pantry additionally have some type of dietary restriction. Can we talk about how that further complicates access to these essential services and food?
So speaking as someone with food allergies, I am grateful that I still live with my parents. My parents are able to afford those gluten-free, peanut-free, dairy alternative items, but that's not the case for everyone. As a student, you're already most likely on a pretty tight budget because things are so expensive, especially right now. And so having that additional layer of purchasing those food items that are at an increased cost adds an additional layer of stress. And so I think having those items available for students here can provide some sense of relief in that aspect.
Tell our audience about the types of items that are most in demand, maybe a type of wish list that you all have at the pantry.
Yeah. It's more of the items that we can't necessarily purchase from Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. So it does happen to be those dietary restriction items. So the dairy alternatives, so like oat milk, rice milk, those gluten-free items, halal items, kosher items, anything that's allergen-free. And I know we have our wish list online as well, too. Kind of the regular items. Produce is something that kind of hard to donate because it has to be fresh when you give it. So it's not like the easiest thing. But produce, frozen meats, those types of things.
UCF senior student Chloe Milliron manages the Knights Helping Knights Pantry. That's all for today's edition of Engage. We'll be back Tuesday at 3 o'clock. All of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org. As always, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about or what you're glad you heard. Send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sharon Stone. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.